Hi, this is Luke Slater and welcome to Space Station Zero. Well, I mean, the whole real drums idea, it's not, I mean, for me, it's not it's not a sudden idea. It's been something I've been pondering on for quite a long time, actually. I didn't have the kit set up. B, there wasn't much of it left to set up. And it just wasn't the right time to start exploring that. It's not really part of what I've been doing for a long time, even though I've always been interested in it. There's never been really a place for it. But the LB Dub Corp album, it just, you know, there's something, what I've always known, there's something about real drumming that it doesn't matter whether you program it however good you are at programming acoustic drums in a computer or anything, it doesn't really quite capture the feel of what's going on. It's so subtle sometimes, you know, and it can get really close, but just the humanness of real drums, you know, being someone who started out playing drums before anything, it's kind of really important. So when I'd made that decision, when everything became about LB Dub Corp and what we were going to do, the first question was, shall I use real drums on it? Because I wanted to use them, but my experience of recording real drums is pretty much zero, because the last time I played them properly I was a kid. So for 2 months, I think, there was this kind of experimental period where it was me and a kit, and a friend of mine kind of helped out a bit by moving mics around, and we were testing all these kind of different things. Weren't really following the rules much, but just trying to tune the drums and put stuff on them to get a sound that sounded good, all right, you know, that just didn't sound like a garage kit too much, you know, which always seems to be when you just record a kit in a room. It just kind of sounds like a garage kit, and I was kind of looking for something a little bit tighter. So we really, even for those tracks, there was like sort of, I think it's 3 tracks with live drums on it. It took 2 months to actually end up with something that I thought was good enough to, and I say good enough, you know, I mean, I'm not like a professional drummer, you know, I got a feel, but I don't play the drums every day, so, you know, I'm doing what I can here, but the feel's there. It was important to get the feel. So yeah, after 2 months we had drums that I thought worked, and then managed to get them into some kind of state where they worked as a dance track, and that was the bit I was really interested in, was whether that could be turned into something that I could play out in a club. So that was the drum challenge, really, to do that, and I think I learned a lot from it. But actually, a lot of the time, everything ended up just being recorded on one mic. I think it was like a RE20 electro voice, yeah, mic. And I think in the end, most of the good stuff came from just having one mic and really dampening the drums, and then just recording it as dry as possible with one mic. And that seemed to be, with all the processing on it, that seemed to be the answer. We tried the multi-track take of drums, but it just didn't really come across in the same way. So yeah, it's sort of Motown styly one mic job. I mean, traditionally working with vocalists, and I've worked with vocalists before in a studio, and I actually, after the experience of that, I'm actually more of a fan of kind of working remotely. And I think it depends how you work remotely, and I wanted kind of an engagement with the vocalist, but for me it was about the vocals. So, for example, the track with Robert, it wasn't really about me, it was about me backing up his vocals with LB Corp music rather than taking his vocals and sort of sampling a bit and putting a little bit in there around the dance track. And I really wanted to sort of get that across to him and give him a free rein to do what he wanted, which he completely, just went for it big time on it. But each track has been different. I mean, Saturn to Home with Miss Kitten was that track, which I have to admit is kind of pretty Bob James influenced track, that kind of production I was trying to get. That track just sat there for months and I couldn't find any vocals for it. I tried my vocals on it, it didn't really work very well, just speaking on it. And I happened to be at a gig and she was there and I hadn't seen her for a while, and how you doing, what you been up to? And I was just about to go and I thought, hang on a sec, hang on, this is synergy right here. So I went back to her and said, look, I got this track, it's pretty off the wall, it's not what you expect, but I think it's meant for you. So I sent her Saturn to Home, and I think she felt really freed by this kind of idea of doing something over, not a techno track or something standard, but pretty different, quite jazzy, I suppose. And she just came up with that, and Alex, who did Golden Star, that was kind of, I think what happened each time, the initial thing that each vocalist had was a kind of a basis, but then when they had done the vocals, then I changed quite a lot around it. So there was this, it wasn't like this is a finished track, I just need a few samples on it. I actually changed stuff to fit around their vocals afterwards, so it made sense with their vocals rather than just laying it on top. There's a lot of samples in the vocal samples in the track. There's a lot of street samples and a lot of samples that I've taken on travels. Arnold from Eindhoven on Only the Good Times. I was lucky to capture him. Such a good message. There's bits of street drumming that I come across. I'm always getting my phone up. If there's any kind of sound on the street and it's got rhythm in it, I'm there with a recorder, And so all these little kind of nuggets I end up using, and LB Corp for me is that kind of vessel where I can try and conjure up something that I guess to an extent I don't normally do, but keeping it relative to the soul of that music, which is house music. So the origins of LB are totally influenced by the origins of house. And in some ways I think that, I hope so, that the album is part homage to that at the same time as trying to move things forward. But it's an enjoyable experience working with vocalists in that way. It's really productive, and I like that kind of. I don't know, maybe things have changed a lot over the years, but the kind of remote working, but not too remote, I think it's a really positive way forward. Yeah. Really, yeah. No, not particularly. I mean, I think that comes more into effect with live shows. So with Planetary Live, there's always a 909 in it. Whatever the processing of the 909 or however it appears, it is 909 led. But in the studio, that's not always the case. I mean, there's been Planetary Salt Systems records that have just, the drum machine's just been, I can never remember the name, just a little plug-in or anything like that, or something on the Electron or anything in that, and just use that. So it's not always 909s for PAS and 808s for LB Dub. It's pretty flexy really, but I think when it comes to live shows, I think Planetary's built around, quite rightly so, around 909. I mean, the thing I've always found about live shows is that, quite rightly, I don't think generally people should care too much about what you're actually doing on your machines. As interesting it is, and there are some people that are intensely interested in what you're doing, and that's fine as well. But when there's a crowd, it's more important to me to try and get across something instantaneously, on the fly, of the moment, as when I think of it. So that kind of on the spot action is always the aim for me, of the moment. And the way I've done that is by almost simplifying as much as possible what I need to do and what I might do. So overcomplicating things doesn't really work for me. It can work for some people, you know. I don't think it's a general philosophy of having a successful live show. But for me, that kind of midway between the crowd and the machines is always the hot spot. I don't like to veer too much to the machines, and not always totally with the crowd. So there's a kind of a midway point with technology that I sit with it and live shows, and that's a comfortable point for me. Is that I don't want to get too bogged down in stuff. I want to be sort of there, present, if you like. The only thing I've ever thought was the best tip for live shows is always have some kind of backup in case all the machines fail. I've been to a few gigs where I've been it's been someone on before me doing a live show, and you know, it all goes down, and it goes down for like 20 seconds. It seems like 2 hours, you know, and you're there like, oh, come on, just play something quick, you know. And the crowd very patiently waiting. So as long as there's some kind of backup in case everything messes up, I think that's a really secure way to approach it when you're performing, you know. I mean, I was using Logic originally when I think there was only Logic and Cubase at the time. So Logic was the first DAW I used with audio, and then Ableton came along, and Ableton pretty much took over the whole creative process of what I do, because it was so quick at looping and recording loops and stacking up things very, very quickly. The kind of the loop factor of it was really great. And then Bitwig was introduced. When I think that's a great. I mean, it's live-esque, but some of the interesting routings you can do with synths, and just some of the things they're building into it that are more extensive than live and quite interesting. I found that really interesting for experimenting with sound. So it ended up really a kind of a 3-DAW situation that they all kind of come. I mean, sometimes they're all literally synced up. So Logic could be synced to Ableton, and I might have Bitwig on there, and that's synced up as well. And there might be another machine synced up to all that. Now you might think that gets actually quite confusing, but it actually works quite simply, because Logic at that point really gets used as a kind of a stem recorder. So a lot of tracks end up in Logic to be mixed, and maybe some additional bits and more streamlined stuff. So they each have a kind of a role. I only ever use live for a live show, just because it's really reliable, and that's the main thing for me. But all these DAWs kind of come into play, and sometimes I'll just open Bitwig and mess around in there for a bit, and see what comes from that. And it's all, I mean, they all work relatively the same way, and I think if you take the time to learn how to get what you want from each one, I don't think you have to know Logic. I know everything about it because I've used it for so long, but I think, well, I guess Live now as well, but if you learn what you need to get from each one, I think it's really possible to get the best out of different DAWs. And there's not only those three, there's more as well if you want. I don't partake in the others, but there's plenty of stuff out there to experiment with, which is really fantastic. Really, I think there's a danger of getting lost in that software world that way, where you only scrape the first layer of something, that you don't dig deeper into it, because I think especially with DAWs, I think it is the other layers that kind of add something important to what you can do on it and what feels easy to do, because the harder something is, the less likely you are to do it. Humans are just lazy like that. We reach for the nearest thing. So I think delving deeper into software is important if you just focus on one thing at a time. But trying to master all at the same time is completely isn't. I don't think that's very productive. I think performance-wise, actually, it's probably the ALM's little box of tricks there. That's really interesting me at the moment, just from the possibilities of the limitations of it, actually, because it is limited. There's everything you could want on there, but it is still limited. You have to make decisions, and limiting in that way really appeals to me. That this is how far you can take it before things get too complicated or too messy, and that idea I've always loved. So that's really interesting. The Motor Synth 2 is interesting because I haven't got my head around it yet. So that's just like this sort of mutation of a synth that I still haven't mastered it in any shape or form at all, which I kind of like, because that keeps it interesting. But I don't know, I tend to get excited about really strange sort of small bits of gear sometimes. It can be anything really. But I tend to kind of pick a bit of gear, so like I might get the 808 and process that and try and find a new sound from it, and that'll be really interesting for a bit, like, but just focus on that, like where can I take this where it doesn't sound like an 808, or it's going to create something or a feedback with something that's going to be really interesting, but it's still coming from an 808. So any bit of kit I think is really interesting like that, if you can sort of like do something with it that it's not designed to do, which actually ties in with that whole original idea where you could, like, the 303 was never really invented to be an acid machine as such. It was meant to be a bassline machine, but the Street decided how it was going to use that. It created that acid sound for itself. It wasn't designed for that. And that's always inspired me, that idea, like, whatever something's designed for, it will just get used however gets, it is sort of endorsed by people and turns people on. So I think I'm always looking for that thing in synths and drum machines that keep it interesting. Try and make noises that you haven't heard before, really is the ultimate goal, I think. I think my biggest regret is selling a Selena ARP, an ARP Selena, which was so heavy, and I was moving and I just couldn't be bothered with it anymore, and I sold that, and I really regret that, because that was a beautiful string synth. To be honest with you, and guiltily, I haven't really sold much. And even all this stuff here, this is the original stuff from, this is the original Planetary stuff. These were the two effects I started Planetary, and this is the Mirage that was used, and the DP4, the ATC that was used on the Function tracks. The old, this was the Waldorf used in the Love track, and the Korg effects. These are just from the 90s, really, and especially the MKS 30. I used that a lot. So, you know, all that gear still, I've kept that since the 90s, same as the 909. I'd probably never buy that gear, given the option now. But I still think the Quad Reverb has one of the best reverbs ever. Interestingly, Matthew from ALM, in the effects unit on that, on the effects module of that, he actually recreated the Quad Reverb reverb. I thought it was a good touch, because as synthetic as the Quad Reverb reverb is, it just has something. I mean, I used it all the time in the 90s. It's yeah, you can pick them up for like £100, so why not? I mean, I like that as well. I like picking up stuff that's not really popular, and just some, you know, boring thing that's gone out of date and nobody really wants it anymore, and sort of seeing whether there's something in that. I think there's a couple of bits. I mean, I said it when we've been doing this session, actually, but absolutely record everything you do, regardless of what you think of it. Doesn't matter. But if you're jamming out something, if you got something going, just record it, because it really is worth just holding on to what you've done. Even if you come back to it in a few months and think, well, that was a load of shit, it's okay, because somewhere in that process you'll find really inspiring bits. And you know, I think it's, I mean, I've spoken about it before, but I think the ideas of limitation, which seems kind of hypocritical sitting in a studio with tons and tons of gear, but it still actually is the way I work. In limit yourself to really certain things to make anything, and whether it's one box or, you know, or like just one setup every time, learn that, and don't think you always need more. I think you can get good music out of nearly everything. So limitation in not only what's in a track, but what you're making that track with. And I think through that you can create a sound that's different, and that's always important. Like the evolution of things must come from that kind of things moving forward with sound and ideas in that way. And ideas don't come from machines, you know, ideas come from up here. That's where it's all stored. So whatever you're using, it's just a machine. You've got to put this into it to get it out.